Hi there, this is David True, and this is my personal reflection based off the project that we had to do on strategic planning, what it took, how we got to the planning process, and the overview of what strategic thinking and planning are. This presentation is broken up into two parts. The first part is going to be the overview of what is strategic thinking, the benefits and the drawbacks of strategic planning. The second part is going to be the group project reflection and my own interpretation of the writing process, the evaluation, the analysis, and other alternatives that we could have had for this project. First, we are going to start with the overview of what is strategic thinking, planning, and the drawbacks. So what is strategic thinking? Using the definition on page 15 of the Bryson text, systematic information gathering about the organization's external and internal environments and various actors' interests, thoughtful examination of the organization's success and failures, clarification of future direction, establishment of organizational priorities for action, and in general attention to the acquisition and use of productive knowledge and skills. To me, this is the part of doing business. This is the organizing and the managing the change process. Strategic thinking is how it impacts the plan around us to be productive, to be organized, to make sure that we are paying attention to the knowledge and skills of our staff, of our resources. This all goes into the strategic thinking. And as we think about the benefits of strategic planning, we want to focus the attention for the implementation process. Strategic planning is not a guarantee. It is a plan that creates a process, creates a flow, and gives a timeline. So some of the other benefits is that it improves the decision making. It is an organizational effectiveness tool to help put things on track. This requires deliberation-informed information gathering, analysis, and synthesis, clarification of the mission and goals to be pursued and developed. The legitimacy of strategic planning is that it helps enhance the effectiveness across different societal systems. The ultimate factor in all of this strategic planning and the benefits is that it helps communication, participation, and accommodates values, accountability, and promotes learning. Some of the drawbacks of strategic planning is that it's not a magic button that makes everything work. It takes time and reevaluation through the process, and it requires change. When you are a new principal, a new administrator, a new boss coming in, strategic planning is a great tool to use to help create a timeline and put things on track. It gives the people that follow you a great idea on what our outcome is going to be, what our projections are going to look like, but it's not something that you want to come in and start creating when the sky is falling mentality. You want to already have plans in place that address those issues as needed. And also, does the cost outweigh the benefits? A huge drawback is going to be the cost analysis of time, of financial resources, allocation of what we're going to put in place. Those benefits, are they going to outweigh what the end result is going to be? And the last drawback of strategic planning is something that is very important, is that it's the external factors that can control the process. The political component, the financial, the economical, the social, and the technological advances, that does affect your strategic planning. In our system that we have at the school that I work with, we had a lot of things in place, technological, where kids have iPads and they have MacBooks. The problem is that if we do not have the technology infrastructure in place to help have Wi-Fi, to help have access to internet, the problem is now what do we do? So the district strategic goal that I work in was making sure that every classroom has a Wi-Fi hotspot. Or when a student goes home, they have the capability of accessing that through our free Wi-Fi systems that we have outside of our campuses that parents and families can access. By looking forward and ahead, that drawback of not having those things in place could have been detrimental to the process of our learning environment. But since we already had those things ready to go and people had access to it and the communication was on point, then our parents and families continued the learning process during the COVID pandemic. The next set of topics is going to be my interpretation of the group project reflection. As I get into the group reflection, I wanted to give my own personal thoughts on my specific group. I felt like the team of 5 that we were all together, very cohesive on. It was very well put together between all of us, and the organization of each of us did have a lot of input to make this mini project successful. I did feel like we were a mini organization that communicated very well. We were cooperative. Nobody was late turning anything in, and we fed off of each other in a way that it allowed us to grow individually and ask each other for help through this, through some of the difficult parts. And so as we get into our process and the writing process, the evaluation, my own analysis of how that whole project went, I just wanted to give props to my 5 team members. I felt they were all stars and rock stars, and if I had to do another project, I would have the same group members. So our group's process. It first started making sure that we met as a team, and our focus was to assign parts to each member. Each member took on their own strengths. My strength was the data mining, my strength was the graphs, my strength was putting the information together. Other group members had strengths of definitions, the research, putting the content and the context together. In the beginning, we were very overwhelmed, and our thoughts were, let's meet every couple of weeks, assign individual tasks to each group member, and then let's meet and see where we're at. We set up a few different Google Docs, one that actually started with the information, one that put all of our information into a format for our final project, and then another Google Doc was the presentation piece. Our focus was to continuously communicate throughout this project. The writing process was the meat and potatoes of putting this whole project together. The collective group, the making sure we were all on the same page. This is where it ultimately happened. Being in a great group where my 4 other teammates had access to all of my information, and vice versa, where I had access to all of their information, we could continuously review each other's to make sure that we were putting a high quality project together. The overview of the strategic plan and what we were thinking and feeling throughout this experience was making sure that we were all on the same page. The Google Docs that we put together for the notes, the presentation, the writing, is where we kept our dialogue and our contact information accessible to each other. Writing was not the most difficult part. Writing was taking what we've learned, taking the information that we've had, and putting it all together. And once we understood our process and the formatting needed, each member added their assigned information to this area. And towards the end of our timeline, our group would review each other's input and make sure that there was a flow of consistency with formatting. We wanted this plan to be in place to where you could pick it up and say, okay, this is a great plan. I'm going to go give this to a group that needs it. Or use it as an example of what it's going to look like when you get done. The presentation throughout the writing process, our team also created a PowerPoint that did focus on the factors that helped implement this plan for others to follow. The evaluation and the analysis, the good, the bad, the ugly, what were my biases, what were my assumptions, and how did the course material play into this was very important. I think from day 1, module 1 to right now, the module 8 that we're reviewing, but even though there's no project for module 8, what I took away from this whole process was when you are a leader and you are in charge, you're the boss, your people are looking up to you, is having a plan in place. What is important, knowing that you have to be flexible, but at the same time being firm with expectations and consistency. What I took away is that the research on this project was very helpful in putting together a plan that would help me understand the organizational planning side. Even though this was a tough project and it forced me to look at things differently, the outcome kind of made it easy to follow. It's always tough being new into a role where you don't know what's going on. And in this situation, that was tough. But with the number of people that we had in our group, it made it easier to bounce ideas and make reflections off of. The bad, the ugly, the process was not difficult, but the group timeline was tough to make sure that we were all on the same page, with all of us having lives and jobs. And we pretty much set in stone every Thursday night at 7 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, we were meeting to review this. And if a group member was late, that was fine. We recorded it and we posted it on our little tabulation of keeping our information together. But something that made it very difficult was the examples that were given to us made the platform kind of difficult to follow. There was a project that had 70 pages, a project that had 15 pages, and each one was different. And I think that autonomy that we had with what our expectations were was not hard to follow, but just making sure that we were on the right track for those expectations. Some of the takeaways that I received from this was that holistic viewpoint when organizing a platform for another business to follow, and having to make sure that you have effective leadership requires effective planning. You want to make sure that there's things on pace and on track, and that falls under leadership. The biases and the assumptions that I had with this is my plan is better than the next, and being competitive. I wanted mine to be the best. I wanted our groups to be the best out of all the other groups. And if you're hiring my firm to do a job, we will do it right and correct. That is my bias. The relation to the course was the overall outlook and the plan was a good connection through the strategy and action, and using our Zweifel and Borey book. This right here was great at accessing information of relating stories and businesses to the strategy and action plan, which I really enjoyed that strategy and action plan book. That's one of my favorites because it gave a lot of examples of what we could follow and what we could do. Alternative to this assignment, the instructions given throughout the project were tough to follow. That is my personal opinion. I felt like it was a lot thrown at us with a ton of direction and a ton of expectations, but as a group, we worked through that. The format for the project through examples was not very clear on how to follow. I think that was part of the autonomy. And the communication about the project may need to require more check-ins with the groups or the instructors on the expectations and any questions. I felt like a lot of it was left open to ourselves to interpret, and that did create confusion. But overall, it was a great project, had a good time with it, and I learned a lot. And there is my reference.